What's up and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today I'll be talking about George of the Jungle.
Watch out for that tree.
Today I'm joined by my buddy Anthony A. Perez to provide his 2 cents on this film as well. We'll be hearing from him in just a hot second, but first, pause this video, check out my description box. I have left his channel in there for you to go over there, subscribe to his channel. He does a bunch of stuff. He does movie reviews just like I do, but he also does these movie appreciation music video things, and he also does live streams. And it's always fun to check out what he's doing over there. He's really laid back, and he's just always fun to watch. I want to thank him for joining me on my first ever collab on my channel. I have been on his channel quite a few times in the past, but I've never done anything on my channel before, so I'm glad to have some company. But yeah, over the past few months, anytime Anthony would suggest a film to watch as a collaboration, it would always be some kind of corny Disney Channel movie from the late 90s, early 2000s, so I thought I'd do something similar here and suggest we watch an actual theatrical Disney movie from that time period as well, just to kind of keep some of that same corniness around and see what happens. And thankfully he was game for George of the Jungle, and here we are. Personally, I think the problems with this movie are infinitesimal at best. Let's get cracking. This review was brought to you by the word of the day: infinitesimal. Immeasurably or incalculably small. George of the Jungle focuses on an all-around good guy, George of the Jungle, a man that was raised by apes, swings on vines, and wrestles with lions as he meets city gal Ursula Stanhope. He instantly finds an attraction for her and her him, which proves to be problematic for Ursula's parents, who are gung-ho about her marrying Lyle, a rich doofus who is willing to risk all to win back her affections. So we'll hear from Anthony about this movie in just a hot second. I wanted to talk about some of the positives in this film before I hand it off to him, and then I'll talk about some negatives afterwards. First of all, I grew up with this movie, just like Anthony, which you'll hear talk about in a second. I watched this all the time as a kid, and I think fondly back to it constantly, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to do this today. This is a very self-aware film that knows exactly how ridiculous that it is. And I had a lot of fun with that aspect, because at the end of the day, this film is a live-action cartoon based on an actual cartoon of the same name. So I feel like you're able to sort of forgive a lot of the stupid and nonsensical things that happen in the movie, because you're not really supposed to take it seriously. Anthony. Just kidding. Anyways, I've always been a big fan of Brendan Fraser, especially in this role. It was either this film or Encino Man that I saw him play first. Not exactly sure which one it was, but he's funny in both of these films, and when I think about George of the Jungle, I think Brendan Fraser. Now, before I get ahead of myself, let's hear from Anthony. Take it away, man.
What's going on, everybody? Interpreting the Stars. I'm here on your channel. A big thanks to David for having me in a video. You've been on my channel quite a few times, so I'm definitely grateful to be able to be on your channel this time around. And yeah, man, you took me on a blast to the past to go back and revisit a film that I've seen dozens of times, specifically when I was a kid. This movie came out when I was about 4 years old. I don't really remember when the first time I saw this movie was, but I remember it being on pretty consistently. We had the VHS tape, we would throw it in all the time, and yeah, this is just one of those really nostalgic films for me. I just remember a lot of the lines, I remember a lot of the moments. A lot of this movie really did, just stick to my mind. I remember a lot about it, but the main thing I did not remember was Brendan Fraser's accent, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit, or not even his accent, his voice in this movie. But yeah, going back and rewatching this movie, I had a lot of fun with it. It was a very cheesy, nostalgic film. With that said, yeah, this is not a fantastic movie or even really a good movie. Rewatching this movie, there was a charm to it. There was this element about it that was taking me back to being a kid and remembering these lines of dialogue and seeing the cast in this film. You have Brendan Fraser, Leslie Mann, Thomas Hayden Church, and you got a solid cast here who has gone on to do really good work outside of this film. So it's one of those things where I don't know if it's the writing or the director or what they were going for, but this film just has something weird about it. It's a very meta, very self-aware film. You have the narrator talking to the characters at times, or literally kind of changing what it is that they're saying or doing on screen. Specifically, like the moment where he says that they were in awe when they saw a mountain, and when they come around the corner, they're like, "Aw," and then he's like, "Not that kind of awe," and then they're like, "Oh," it's like a different kind of thing where they're, it's kind of very meta, very breaking the fourth wall kind of film. I enjoyed that about this film. It made it funny. It made it enjoyable. There are a couple moments like that where I did genuinely laugh because they were really self-aware about the joke, and it was the cheesiness of it that made me laugh. Beyond that, the film is pretty cheesy, man, and not even cheesy in the way that I love. It was a little cringy watching it, I'm not gonna lie. Brendan Fraser as George of the Jungle, that was a strange casting because he looks fantastic in the role, and as a kid I loved him in this role, but revisiting it, his voice is incredibly cringy. He just sounds like a normal dude trying to be a Tarzan-esque character, which is essentially what George of the Jungle is. He's a ripoff of Tarzan in a lot of ways, which I believe they make a joke about in the film. And yeah, he just kind of stands out as this very cringy element throughout the course of the film. Not only because he's like the standout, monkey man character, but mainly because of his voice. He's trying to talk as if he is this person who doesn't have any knowledge on how to speak properly, that doesn't know how to form proper sentences, that is, very Tarzan-esque. We've seen it done, and it works in the Tarzan films. And in this case, it's just a dude that has a normal American accent trying to do that kind of voice without putting on some sort of, I don't know, some sort of monkey accent, some sort of like voice to make him sound like he's tribal, or that he doesn't really have that knowledge to form together proper sentences. So it just sounds like an actor with an American accent doing this really bad Tarzan impression. And so throughout the course of the film, I couldn't help but just think, man, some of these lines of dialogue and some of these, the delivery of some of these lines of dialogue, so bad, so cheesy, so terrible. The movie outside of that is fairly rushed. The romance element of the film is very rushed. But beyond that, what I will say is that I did have a nostalgic good time revisiting the film. I wasn't bored while watching it, so that's a good thing. I was at least entertained and able to kind of have a laugh at the film and some of the moments that were genuinely funny. But beyond that, yeah, this is a film that I found to be incredibly, incredibly cringy at times, mainly around the dialogue and some of the performances. Some of the performances fit the tone of the film, and I felt like that's fine. Like Thomas Hayden Church, I thought did a really good job in the movie. I thought he fit that kind of over-the-top villain-esque character that's kind of, a wuss, you know what I mean, but tries to act like he's tough. I think he fit that character very well. Even Leslie Mann is great in the film. I think her character is just so easily, enamored and falls in love with George so quickly. And let's get into some other stuff about the romance in this film. There's quite a few stuff in this movie that made me think, man, we really have gotten soft as a culture, because I watched this movie a bajillion times as a kid. I remember my dad and my mom sitting down to watch this movie with me countless times. And it is crazy to go back and revisit it and see how many things they really touch on about sensuality and sexuality. There's literally a scene where Brendan Fraser is 100% naked in this scene, and they cover his junk, but you can see like his butt crack, and he's just standing there like covering his, his front and his back, but his full like oiled up, ripped body is on screen. And I was just thinking to myself, they would never ever put this in a child's film from Disney ever today. And it's just kind of crazy to go back and revisit this movie and see just certain lines of dialogue or certain moments that lean into sexuality, or there's even a joke or a moment about gender roles in there. And I'm just thinking, like, there are things that they put in this movie that they probably would never have put into a Disney movie today. So that was kind of a funnier element to go back and revisit, and also kind of an eye-opener of how soft we really have gotten as a culture. But yeah, overall, this movie for me was not great. It was not great, but I had a good time revisiting it. So a big thanks to you for having me in this video, my friend. You've inspired me to put together a full-blown review over on my channel at some point. For anybody who's interested, David has been over on my channel quite a few times now at this point, with our most recent collab being for the When a Stranger Calls remake that came out in the mid-2000s, I think 2005, 2006, I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But a big thanks to you, my friend, for having me in this video. Definitely had a good time rewatching this movie, even though it's not great, but I definitely appreciate you putting me onto this movie to rewatch it. And yeah, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you now. Thank you again. See you later.
Somebody woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I'm just kidding, man. Thanks so much for doing this again. I highly appreciate it. Check out my description box. Like I said before, I'll have a link to Anthony's channel where I would urge everybody to subscribe to everything that he does, because he's pretty awesome. I gotta say it though, man. I can't believe how much you thought this was a cringe fest. You praised the cringiest Disney Channel original movies. You gotta at least admit that it's better than those, right? A couple of rebuttals that I have to say about what you said. George of the Jungle doesn't have an accent or a strange voice, he has a limited vocabulary. Yes, his ape guardian speaks fluent English, and if he was raised by that ape, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to still talk like Tarzan, but again, this falls into that realm of ridiculous, stupid, nonsensical things that occur that you just kind of have to overlook because it's a live-action cartoon. The main negatives that I personally saw were things that I know you don't look too deeply at, and that was narrative. This movie had no point. That was my problem. It was very much a character comedy. All these characters are funny, they're stupid, and that's fine, but it's pretty aimless at where it's going. I was constantly looking for a protagonist or antagonist, and they simply don't exist. The most focused on characters have the littlest importance, and the side characters had the most, like the mom and dad and the two henchmen. Those were the only characters in this movie even trying to do anything, and none of these characters really sense true value in their actions, which is what forms a strong narrative. Purpose. There was no purpose. But honestly, that's the only negative that I have to say. It affects other areas in my grading scale though, because the writing of the narrative forms the rest of the movie. But I like the characters, I like the comedy, I like the innuendos the movie had, and there were a lot of those. I like the music choices, I even like the fart jokes. Screw it. It brought me back to my childhood and my nostalgia blew up. But thanks again to Anthony for joining me on my channel. I hope we can do something like this again soon. I know there's a George of the Jungle 2, but I really don't want to watch that. Let's go ahead and break down my final score for a second. From an unbiased technical vantage point, that is clearly not where this film finds its strength. I think both Anthony and I can agree on that. There's nothing particular that stands out as cinematic in this film or well executed. It's nothing absolutely horrible, anything that specifically stands out as bad. It's just bland on a technical level. That score is 64%. That being said, this is all about your bias. This is all about entertaining you, making you laugh, and I had a pretty big smile on my face while watching this film again after so many years, I gotta admit. So this score is actually 82%. Averaging out the two scores together, we come to the final rating of 73%. 73 out of 100 possible stars, or a C letter grade. I don't know, I find it more than nostalgic. I think it still works really well for a modern audience if they've never seen it before. In fact, it made me want to go back and watch other live-action cartoon films like Space Jam, Looney Tunes Back in Action, things like that. Maybe someday I'll check those out and review them on my channel. Until then, I want to hear your thoughts on George of the Jungle in the comments section down below. Is this a big trip to Nostalgia City for you, or do you think that it's aged so much that it's unwatchable? As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie pick. Thanks for joining up with us. We think you're